again, Sabbath, that we can plumb stop and just enjoy you and church family. Lord, we ask as we learn this afternoon about the body, give us understanding and give us a desire of the need to take care of it. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Can a young'un come up here? I need your help. Okay, can you help me teach? We're going to do it real quick. Okay. We have anatomy and we have physiology. And you can come on up here too. Come on up here, both of you. Turn around. Now, what I want you to do is show them your teeth. Show them your teeth. Okay, touch them. Show them your teeth. Okay, that's anatomy. Okay, now show them your tongues. Okay, that's anatomy. That's parts of our body. Now, I ain't going to show them your throat or your stomach. Is that okay? But you got a throat and a stomach. So the parts of our body is called anatomy. But how it works, the digestion, is called physiology. And we're going to talk about physiology this afternoon. Is that okay? Okay, you can sit down. Thank you. We're told that we need to know physiology and hygiene. Now, it's easy. Physiology is the function of the organs in the body working. But what's hygiene? Well, I know hygiene is using deodorant. They told us that at work when I went to work. They said you got to have good hygiene. It was in the handbook. It said you'll get in trouble if you don't have good hygiene. So they told me that was putting deodorant on and washing every day. But what's hygiene mean? Hygiene, the word is meant to care for. So let's talk about hygiene of a car. Yes, wash it is part of its hygiene. But rotating the tires are hygiene. Changing the oil is hygiene. Changing the transmission fluid is hygiene. We don't have to change plugs like we did when we were kids. And plugs last forever now. But that's hygiene. So hygiene means caring for something, making it work. Does that make sense? So what we're going to talk about today is physiology and hygiene, how to take care of it. And it's based on, I figured we'd have some young'uns. It's based on first book in Physiology and Hygiene, J.H. Kellogg. It's a great book. For adults, we can learn from it. But it's meant for children. And so I gave one to both of my grandkids that are, I have two grandkids that are 7, and then I have 3 grandkids that are, well, 2 that are 4, one's turning 4 in a couple of weeks. So I have 3 that are 4. All 3 of my kids had young'uns in the same year. Well, my daughter and 2 daughter-in-laws. I still call them my young'uns. And then I have another one that's, as you heard earlier, due any time. And so the 2 eldest, I gave them this book this past summer, and I said, I want y'all to add this to your school. And part of your school, they're homeschooling school, so I said, I want this to be your science. And so they're using this book as their science book this year. So as I go into it, there's going to be some things that are very basic, very elementary. But it's meant to be elementary for these guys right here so they'll understand. And then as we go on, we'll get into some more adult-sounding stuff. It's interesting as I study Kellogg, the more I read, I like Kellogg. Kellogg is tremendous. Inspiration said that in the turn of the century, he was the best physician in the world. And as I read Kellogg and talking about physiology, there's a few things that we've learned since. There's a few things we've learned since I went to school that wasn't quite right. Such as, let's say, last night we talked about vitamin D. We used to think, ooh, if you've got a vitamin D over 32, that's awful high. Well, it's not that way anymore. That's the bottom number. And so that's what science is. It's constantly learning. Look at CPR. First time I did it was change on 3 next time. And we've matured significantly in CPR. And so what I'll share is basic for the kids, but we as adults can also sometimes learn basic. There's a few things, like I said, Kellogg says that maybe we've learned a little different today, but in general, it's accurate. So closely is health related to our happiness that we cannot have the latter without the former. Therefore, we can't have happiness without being healthy. A practical knowledge of science of human life is necessary in order to glorify God in our bodies. A practical knowledge of the science in human life is necessary in order to glorify God in our bodies. And is that a goal, to glorify God in our bodies? Yes, so in order to glorify God in our bodies, we must do what? We must have what? We must have a practical knowledge of how to run the body. And that only makes horse sense. Y'all have horse sense, right? Common sense. As a boy, as I mentioned earlier, you learned you had to learn the anatomy of the equipment, the tractors and the implements, and you had to understand the physiology of it in order to maintain and to repair. Why not even more so know the anatomy and physiology of the human body in order that it may run at its best in order to glorify God? It is therefore the highest importance that among the studies selected for childhood, physiology should occupy the first place. And that's why I gave this to my grandchildren. I said, I want you to learn this book and learn it well. When I was a kid, and kids would come say, you want to smoke? No, I don't smoke. Why? My church doesn't allow us to smoke. Well, it kept me from smoking, but was that the right answer? You want to go drink after school? No, I don't drink. Our church doesn't allow us to drink. It kept me from drinking, but it wasn't the right answer. If I could have told that little kid, didn't you know it turns your liver green? Or we'd say green. Don't you know that it kills your brain cells? Or don't you know if you do that drug, it can kill your brain? Or you might be taken away from your family because you could get in trouble and go to juvie school? So the physiology is understand. Children can make better decisions. Why not to eat and drink certain foods if they understand the harmful effects physiologically on their body and choose themselves not to do it just because mom and dad said not to do it? They're more apt to, once they get out of the house, not doing it because they don't want to destroy their bodies. It's not, now I don't have to do this anymore. I can go do this on my own, and mom and dad won't know it. Or I'm 18, therefore I don't have to obey father and my mother. That's crazy. How few know anything about the structure and function of their own bodies and of natural laws. Many are drifting about without knowledge, like a ship at sea without compass or anchor. And what is more, they are not interested to learn how to keep their bodies in a healthy condition and prevent disease. Upon fathers as well as mothers rests responsibility for the child's earlier as well as its later training. And for both parents, the demand for careful and thorough preparation is most urgent. A demand. Before taking upon themselves the possibilities of fatherhood and motherhood, men and women should become acquainted with the laws of physical development, with physiology and hygiene, again, understanding how it works and how to keep it running, with the bearing of prenatal influences, and with the laws of heredity, sanitation, dress, exercise, and the treatment of disease. They should also understand the laws of mental development and moral training. Health to be guarded. Since the mind and the soul find expression through the body, both mental and spiritual vigor are in great degree dependent upon physical strength and activity. Whatever promotes physical health promotes the development of a strong mind as well as balanced character. So what makes our bodies healthy also makes our spirituality healthy. Can you see that? Because the brain is part of the body. If the body is healthy, then we're more prone to having better spirituality. Without health, no one can as distinctly understand or as completely fulfill his obligations to himself, to his fellow beings, or his Creator. Without health, no one can as distinctly understand or as completely fulfill his obligations to himself, his fellow beings, or to his Creator. And we have a responsibility to God here. Therefore, the health should be as faithfully guarded as the character. And we talked about that earlier. A knowledge of physiology and hygiene should be the basis of all educational effort. So as we teach our kids in homeschool, it's interesting how Satan works. I was flying out of Knoxville somewhere out west, and I was sitting by this young girl. She was in her late 20s, early 30s. And she taught at UT, at Knoxville, at the university. I said, what do you teach? Science. What do you teach? Evolutionary science. Oh. Well, we're talking. And she says, UT, University of Tennessee at Knoxville, will never be a quality school of higher education until every student understands evolutionary science. I said, what's that got to do with a math student? She says, it's still the basics of everything. See how Satan is? He wants to take you away from. Here, God's saying, physiology is the basis, and hygiene is the basis of all educational effort. That's the foundation, because through this we can then understand and learn and have good bodies to do what we do. Satan's pulling away from that and saying, no, evolution is the basis of all education. The house we live in. Each of us has a house of his own, which is far more wonderful and more curious than the grandest place ever built. It is not a very large house. It has just room enough in it for one person. This house, which belongs to each one of us, is called the body. The body's like a machine. In some ways, the body is more like a machine than a house. It has many different parts, and now I'm reading Kellogg here. It has many different parts which are made to do a great many different kinds of work. We see our eyes. We see with our eyes. We hear with our ears. Walk with our legs and feet. And do a great many things with our hands. If you have ever seen the inside of a watch or a clock, you know how many curious little wheels it has. And yet a watch or a clock can do but one thing, and that is to tell the time of the day. The body has a great many more parts than a watch has, and for this reason, the body can do many more things than can a watch do. If we want to know all about a machine and how it works, we must study all its different parts and learn how they are put together and what each part does. Then, if we want a machine to do work well and to last a long time, we must know how to use it and how to take proper care of it. And again, the tractor is an excellent, for me, off a farm, that's probably one of the best things I can relate to here. And I use the tractor a lot as an analogy. Do you think your watch could keep time well if you should neglect to wind it? Or if you should break any of its wheels? It's not going to work right. I remember when I turned 7 years old, I got a watch from my grandparents. And they lived in St. Petersburg, and I put that watch on, and I went out and played in the sand. And then I had a hankering to go out and take a little swim. There went the watch. I had just gotten it. Yes? St. Petersburg in Russia? No, sir. Florida. It is just the same with the human machine, which we call the body. We must learn its parts and how they are and what they are for, and how they are made, and how they are put together, and how they work. Then we must learn how to take proper care of the body so that its parts will be able to work well and last for a long time. Each part of the body which is made to do some special kind of work is called an organ. Now, I have a different philosophy on health insurance than most people do. But I would say let's say if we had health insurance like we have car insurance. Now, can you imagine having car insurance that if you didn't put oil in it and you burned out the engine, no problem, you could have it rebuilt. Or if you were, if you just didn't watch what you're doing and you ran off the road and hit a tree, no problem, insurance pay for it. Well, it does for that a lot of times for accidents. But let's say that you just squalled your tires all the time. No problem. Your insurance will just buy you a new set of tires. Well, that's the way human insurance works. Don't take care of your heart, no problem. We'll go and get a Roto-Rooter and get it cleaned out. Or you don't, you take a lot of drugs, you don't drink your water, and the kidneys or liver starts failing, no problem. We'll just give you some drugs and we'll start, taking care of that way. But if we had health insurance, like we have auto insurance, that it may cover certain things, but we have responsibility for the hygiene of the car, like the hygiene of the body, like changing your oil, like not squalling your tires. You know what squalling is, right? Squealing your tires. And we had more personal input, I think we would have better care of the body. See, you don't have to worry about the body because you have insurance. You see? See, people don't worry about they don't worry about it. But if we had insurance like that, who cares? Just drive it, whatever, But we have to be more careful because insurance doesn't cover it. So for each part of the body which is made to do something special kind of work is called an organ. So organs in the body. And you can kind of go down and see the different ones. You've got your trachea and your heart and your lungs and your gallbladder and your liver and your spleen and your colon, your small intestines and your bladder, and it's just different organs in the body. Do we know how they work? Do we know how to care for them and make them to keep working? See, if we understand how to take care of that part on the tractor that might wear out, then we can do what it takes to keep it running longer. The study of various parts of the body and how they are put together is anatomy. The study of what each part does is physiology. And the study of how to take care of the body is hygiene. In a general view of the body, you have the parts. Just as a tree has a trunk, the main part of the body is called a trunk. Isn't that interesting? And just as a tree has limbs, our body has limbs. Isn't that an interesting correlation that they did when they came up with anatomy? There are 2 arms and 2 legs growing out of the human trunk. So we speak of the arms and legs as limbs like a tree. Sometimes call the arms the upper extremities and the lower legs and the legs the lower extremities. At the top of the trunk is the head. Names of the parts. Now let us look more closely at these different parts. As we speak the names of different parts, let us touch one of that part of himself, which is named. Let's begin with the head, and you go through the different parts of the body for the child to touch and identify what those parts are. The chief part of the trunk is the chest or the abdomen and the backbone. The head is then joined to the trunk by the neck. Each arm has a shoulder, upper arm, forearm, wrist, hand, and fingers, which are part of the hand. Isn't that interesting how they spell it different? How do you think we'd spell it? F-A-N-G-E-R-S. He phonetically spelled it. Each leg has a hip, thigh, lower leg, ankle, foot, toes, part of the foot. And our hands and face and the whole body are covered with something as soft and smooth as fine silk, and that's the skin. What grows on top of our head is hair, and what grows on the tips of our fingers and our toes is nails. Inside the body, we have bones. If you take hold of your arm, it seems soft on the outside, but if you press upon it, you would feel something hard inside. The soft part is called flesh. The hard part is called bone. When all the bones placed properly together, they're called the skeleton. Now's the time to buy a skeleton. And I'm getting ready to buy a skeleton at Walmart for my grandkids so that they can start learning the parts of the bone. I saw one at Walmart the other day, a pretty decent sized skeleton, and it had the major bones that were there in plastic for about $16. Now you can't normally go buy a skeleton from an educational place for $16. Oh, yes, so that's right. So if you want to find for your young kids and teach them, or your grandkids, teach them anatomy, it's a time to go out and buy that, and it's a decent price. The skeleton forms the framework of the body, just as the heavy timbers of a house form its framework. It supports all parts. The skull. The bony part of the head is called the skull. In the skull is a hollow place or a chamber. You know that a rich man often has a strong room or a box in his fine house. This is interesting. Listen to this time frame. In which he keeps his gold and other valuable things. The chamber in the skull is the strong room of the body. It has strong, tough walls of bone and contains the brain. The brain is the most important. Why is the brain the most important organ in the body? Runs everything else, but even more important, it's the communication center for God, us and God. If the brain's not right, if you ain't right, you know people who ain't right? We got people who ain't right around. You ever see people who ain't right? Can they communicate with God as well? Not at all. And so we've got to take care of our brain. I have people who come in that have been in motor vehicle accidents, who had head trauma. And we call them folks, they have head injury. Does that affect thinking? It does. When I was 16, I was heading home from work. Someone ran a stop sign, hit me. I was on a motorcycle, gave me a concussion, and I now have something called Tourette's. Now, you normally don't ever see it, but there is times that this arm is totally, I can't stop it from shaking. I can't stop from shaking. My whole body stopped from shaking. Sometimes I just babble because I haven't had proper hygiene on my body. Now, if I perform proper hygiene, nobody knows it. Mary Lou knows it because she sees me at my worst. So what are some things that can cause, from a hygienic standpoint, that would cause me to start having problems? That's number one. That will do it to me every time. Lack of sleep. What's another one? Lack of water, stress. Stress is huge for me. Put me late to somewhere, and I'm not doing good. It drives me nuts. Lack of water. Also, what helps me a lot is B complex, lithium orotate, and magnesium. Those three right there keep me running. And many people have no idea I have Tourette's. But if I get my sleep, exercise, water, manage the stress, and if I do the B complex, the lithium orotate, and the magnesium, most folks have no idea. But why is it because of? The brain. I took a hard impact. It destroyed the helmet when I hit the ground. If I had not a helmet, it probably would have killed me with the damage that was done to the helmet. But I'm still here. The brain is the most important and also the most tender and delicate organ in the body, whole body. This is why it is so carefully guarded from injury. The framework of the back is called the backbone. This is not a single bone, but a row of bones arranged one above the other. Each bone has a hole through it, about as large as one of your fingers. The trunk of the body, like the skull, is hollow. Its walls are formed partially by a backbone, and the ribs and partially flesh. A fleshy wall divides the hollow of the trunk into two parts, an upper chamber called the chest and a lower called the abdomen. So you've got, for you young'uns, you've got the chest, the abdominal area, the abdomen, the lung and the heart. The chest contains a pair of organs called the lungs, which we breathe. It also contains something which we can feel beating on the left side. This is the heart. But did you know it's not always on the left side? Have you ever had a patient on the right side? I mean, they're plumb swapped. You go in there and you're checking for rebound tenderness, for appendicitis. It's over here. Their gallbladder's over here. Everything's plumb swapped, opposite sides. So it's not always, but you've got your sternum here, and your heart is set just over to the side, over to the left a little. It's still in this area under the breastbone, but it's over to the left than centered. The stomach and liver. The abdomen in the abdomen are some very wonderful organs that do different kinds of work for the body. Among them are the stomach, which we have. I don't know if this has a pointer or not. It might. There we go. We've got the stomach here. Who's seen a stomach? Isn't that cool? The stomach is like a bag, just a rubber, it's a leather bag, like a little purse, and it's actually kind of hard, and it's kind of brownish in color, and so you've got your stomach, and so it'll go flat, and then it'll get large as you put food in it. Then you've got your liver and your bowels. You've got your large intestine, which actually hooks right here, comes up over through here, down through here, and then out. And you've got the liver. Our foods. We all know very well that if we do not eat, we shall rapidly lose in weight and become very weak and feeble. Did you ever think how much one eats in course of a lifetime? Let's see if we can figure it out. How much do you suppose a boy eats in a day? In Kellogg's day, now this is interesting, see if you pick this up. Let's say 2 pounds at a meal. How much does he eat in a year? There are 365 days in a year. 365 days, or 365 multiplied by 2 equals 730. What did Kellogg just identify? A 2 meal a day. That was normal at his time, was a 2 meal a day. I'll explain something when I come to it. This is interesting. So a boy eats a good many times his own weight in a year. How much would a person eat in 50 years? Our bodies are composed of what we eat. And Harvard is now saying, you are what you eat. And it's true. And Harvard is now saying that in their publications. If we eat bad food, our bodies will be made out of poor material and will not be able to do their work well. It is true. This is why it says, perfect health is perfect circulation. And she talks about the blood being part of that circulation. So if your blood has, we talked about Twinkies before, then you're going to have Twinkie blood. And you have Twinkie blood, you're going to have a Twinkie brain. Yeah, or every other cell in the body, because that Twinkie is going to feed the rest of the body. So we are what we eat. So you see how important it is to learn something about our foods. We ought to know what things are good for us to eat and what will do us harm. And again, that's hygiene. By understanding foods that give us health versus foods that do not give us health. I had a friend, a surgeon, and he told me, Walt, he says, it's real basic. It's real simple. Here's how you keep a healthy body. Here's how you treat a patient to start with. He said, first is you identify the organ or system that is involved in whatever the ailment may be. So let's say it's stress. So what's the organ or system? Okay? Okay, but when you think of stress, what organ is mostly affected? Or the brain. Does stress affect the brain? Now, yes, there can be stress on the body, which affects all that. But mental stress, we think of the most, that would definitely be the brain. But then what systems affect the brain or can be affected by stress? The adrenals. We blow the adrenals. We're now learning that thyroid issues may just be an adrenal issue if we fix the adrenals. What about digestion? Does that affect the brain? Does circulation affect the brain? So this surgeon told me, he says, Walt, figure out the primary organ or system and then find out the secondary and tertiary organs and systems that affect the primary problem. Then he said, take away anything that may harm any of those organs or systems. And then provide what those organs and systems need to run well, such as the food. He said, if you do that, you fix most people. Isn't that neat? And as I started looking at diabetes, my first 20 years, we never reversed diabetes. Now we see over a 98% reversal of type 2 diabetes. And it's by identifying those items that he taught me to look at. It then starts working. Because you take away what's harming it, and you provide it what it needs, and it runs fine. Who's a mechanic? Anybody a mechanic? Know how to work on a vehicle's engine? You do the same thing. Yes, there's sometimes some anatomy things that break. You just got to fix that part that breaks, but then it'll start working. Foods and poisons. Foods are those substances which nourish the body and keep it in good working order. Poisons do not nourish the body and cause it harm. Most plant foods are included in 3 classes: fruits, grains, and vegetables. And in these, Kellogg included the nuts and seeds. Fruits are the fleshy part of the plant which contains the seed. Our most common fruits are apples, pears, peaches, plums, cherries, and various kinds of nuts. Here you put the nuts under fruits. Tomatoes, watermelons, and pumpkins are really fruit, though they are not generally so called. A lot of people call tomatoes a what? A vegetable, but it's a fruit. The seeds of grass-like plants are known as grains, of which we have wheat, rye, barley, corn, and rice. There are a few seeds that grow in pods, such as peas and beans, which sometimes resemble grains. We eat the leaves, stems, or roots of some plants, as cabbage, celery, turnips, and potatoes. Foods of this kind are called vegetables. There are other things which we eat or drink them, which make us sick or otherwise do us harm. These are called poisons. Only such food as is pure and free from poison is good or safe to use. Narcotics and stimulants. And there was a lot of narcotics and stimulants at that time of Kellogg. I don't know if there was as much as today, but they had their fair share. There are a number of substances known as narcotics and stimulants which, from their effects upon the body, may be classified as poisons: tobacco, opium, alcohol, chloral, and I'm trying to remember It's a drug that people were using. It's in a euphoric, I believe, and they were using it to make them happy. Are included in these classes. Death has often been caused by taking small quantities of any of these poisonous drugs. Most persons eat many things which are not good for them. Some people do not stop to think whether what they eat is good for them or likely do them harm. Sometimes, without knowing it, we eat things which are harmful to us. Mary Lou's got this bad habit of going, we have a store, so, we're able to eat out of our store. But when we buy new products to put in the store, it takes her a long time to decide whether she wants it. Or if we go to a grocery store, it takes her a long time if she's getting a new item. She takes a long time reading labels. But is that a good thing? It is. If you can't pronounce it, it might be not good to put in you. And there's some long words in there. But we need to read labels. Okay, now, I need you to come up here. And I need you to come here. Come on up. Okay, so come on up over here. Now what I want you to do, from this side to this side, I want you to stand from the tallest to the shortest. So what do you need to do? This is the tallest, this is the shortest. Okay, now, so we got that solved. So, you are taller than, what's your name?
Jonathan.
Jonathan is taller than, what? Jasmine. Okay, Jonathan's taller than Asmon. So we would say Jonathan, comma, Jasmine. But let's say that Henry is over here the same height as Jasmine. So we'd say Jonathan, comma, Jasmine, and Timothy. Do you see how that works? That's how it works on your nutrition labels. So if it has a comma, it means there's more Jonathan than Jasmine. But if there's the same amount as Henry and Jasmine, it has an and. It's the same. It's an and. So, okay, you can have a seat. We're going to leave Jasmine up here. So let's say that Jasmine and Henry are the first two ingredients. What does that mean? Equal amounts. Pick up your Jif peanut butter. What's the first item? Peanuts. What's the word in the middle? And. What's the next word? You could legally call it sugar butter. If you can call it peanut butter, you can call it sugar butter because there's as much sugar in Jif peanut butter as there is peanuts. Isn't that interesting? So that's why Mary Lou and I, but that's why we should read labels. And so that's what he's talking about. Thanks, Jasmine. So sometimes without knowing it, we eat things which are harmful to us. We just don't look. Now, there are times people spend more time and care for their animals than them. You look at a person who has highfalutin horses. Do you think they're particular about what horse feed they eat? You think they're particular that their hay doesn't have mold in it? What about their cows? Do you think they're particular on the feed that those cows get? Absolutely. And then they'll run down to McDonald's and eat a hamburger. We should learn what is good to eat and what is not good, and then be very careful not to eat anything which is likely to do us harm. Very important. Disease foods. When a person is sick, he is said to be diseased. Animals are sometimes sick or diseased. Vegetables are also sometimes diseased. Animals and vegetables, diseases are not good for food. Pork and flesh of the hog is more likely to be diseased than any other kind of animal food. Now, do you think it's just because God did not like the Israelites and that they didn't obey, so he set this real tough law on them and said, listen, you don't obey me, so you can't have pig no more. I'm going to deprive you of enjoying pig. No, it's because he loved them. And he said that because of this right here. Because he knows of all the animals, pork, flesh of the hog, is more likely to be diseased than any other kind of animal food. And so God is trying to protect his children, just as you as a parent try to protect your children. Beef and mutton may be diseased also. Sheep and cattle are sometimes sick of diseases very much like those which human beings have. Meat which is pale, yellowish, or a dark red color is unhealthful and should not be eaten. Meat should never be eaten raw. Now, when God said, okay, at the flood, you can start eating animals, inspiration said he said so for 2 reasons. Do you know those 2 reasons? Not much else to eat. What else? Inspiration said that human life was so long that they had gotten into mischief. In order to shorten their lifespan, he had them to start eating meat. Yes. Now, Cornell says if we stop eating meat, we'll extend our life 15 years. No, not to 900 years again. But, so God did it for 2 reasons. One, there wasn't a lot on earth, but I think he could have figured that out for them. But I believe that shortening of life was a big part of it. Now, we've gotten kind of short enough, and he didn't want us to plumb die off. But what was the other item there? I don't remember. Stale or decayed foods. Food which has been allowed to stand until it is spoiled or has become stale, musty, or moldy, such as moldy bread or fruit, is unfit to be eaten and is often a cause of very severe sickness. A great deal of the sugar and syrups which we buy is made from corn by a curious process which changes the starch in the corn into sugar. Sugar, which has been made in this way, is not so sweet as cane sugar and is not healthful. Remember, Kellogg developed the foods, and his brother then took them and was the businessman and sold them. But you know that Kellogg and his brother got into a fight. They actually became estranged. His brother started changing the chemical compounds in those foods, which gave them longer shelf life. And Kellogg got upset and said, that's not why I made these foods. And they could not communicate, and they got estranged.
I think part of the reason, too, was his brother wanted to be like the other guy, Post.
Oh, yes.
Who was,
that's right.
so much money.
There was competition there. Yes, there was. You're true. Yeah. Because they were both there in Battle Creek. Our drinks. Water is really the only drink. It is the only substance which will satisfy thirst. I thought it was in here, but I don't guess so. Let's go back to food. Have I mentioned here before about lunch? Lunch? About where it is said that lunch is not healthy for us? Have I mentioned that here? You can find it back in the 1800s in medical writing that lunch is not good for you.
Which meal is lunch?
It's a good question. So, prior to the Industrial Revolution, where did men work? In the fields. Wife made big breakfast. Wife made big dinner. Wife made supper. And at that time, it was said that lunch was unhealthy. Well, when the Industrial Revolution came, what happened? Husband went to factory. Did wife go to factory with him to make big dinner? No. So wife was at home, made big breakfast before husband went to work at the factory. But then she went and sent a little meal with him. See, the lunch that they talk about was the midnight snack or eating between meals. Lunch meant little meal. Little meal. So, wife did not make big meal for husband. The factory didn't have a big cafeteria. So wife sent little meal with husband to the factory, which was called lunch. And that's how the noon meal started being called lunch. Husband comes home, and now wife makes big meal because she didn't make big meal for the noon meal. So now supper is a bigger meal. Big meal is called what? Thanksgiving, Christmas, big meal. And so the big meal name went to the supper time, the last meal. And so that's how we then came up with breakfast, dinner, and supper. And so when you hear about saying lunch in old medicine, they're talking about eating between, and they're talking about that midnight snack. So water is really the only drink. It is the only substance which will satisfy thirst. Why do we need water? If we should wet a sponge and lay it away, it would become dry in a few hours, as the water would pass off into the air. Our bodies are losing water all the time. As I'm talking, as I'm breathing, I'm losing water. The more I talk, the more I'm losing hydration. Our bodies are losing water all the time, and we need to drink water to keep ourselves from drying up. Still, another use for water is to dissolve and wash out our bodies through the sweat of the skin, and in other ways, the waste and worn out particles which are no longer of any use. What happens when we get dehydrated with the feces? That's right. When we're dehydrated, the hypothalamus says, we need more fluid. We need more fluid. Where's there some more fluid in the body? There's some in the colon, and sucks it dry. Yes, the colon is supposed to absorb fluids, but it sucks out too much, and you then become dried feces, becoming constipated, or drier feces. That doesn't sound good, does it? Yeah. Did I ever tell you what I did to a little boy one time that came in over that subject? Mom and Dad couldn't get the little boy to drink. I'm thinking, what do I do? And sometimes I'm out of the box. But sometimes you don't learn new stuff unless you get out of the box, you know? And so Mom and Dad, mostly Mom, but Dad's there too. Please help us to get our son to drink. So I go and I sit down, and you know where my herb cabinet is, out in the store. I'm sitting there right in front of the herb cabinet. The little boy's sitting on the door side, the mama beside him, then the daddy, and I'm sitting right here. I said, okay, what do I do here? And I said to the mama, do you mind if I get graphic? She says, I want my son to drink. Figure it out. It's okay. So I said to the little boy, what if you have a bowel movement? And then you get up and you get a straw and start drinking out of the toilet. Would you do that? And the little boy goes, gross, no. I said, that's what is happening when you don't drink enough water. And the mama goes, do you have some water I can drink? But that's what's happening. We're absorbing too much of that liquid, and we don't need all that stuff. We need some to absorb out of the fluid out. But so yes, the waste, it affects the waste. We need to sweat. When I was in Virginia, I had a lot of patients from New York City and Washington, D.C. But especially New York City, I would ask the ladies on coming in on their doing their history, do you sweat? It is not ladylike to perspire, most of them would say. And so they go from their highfalutin condos to their highfalutin Mercedes or whatever, and to their highfalutin stores, to their highfalutin cars, to their highfalutin restaurants, to their highfalutin apartment, all having air conditioning. And they never sweated. And it would usually take my female therapist average of 5 days to get these ladies to sweat. We would do salt baths. We would do saunas. But to unclog their pores, on average, the girls said it would normally take 5 days to get these women out of New York City to start sweating. They were that clogged up. Sweating is good. Sweating is how we get rid of toxins out of our largest organ in the body, which is the skin. Impure water. Most waters have more or less substance dissolved in them. Water which has much water which has much lime in it is called hard water. Do y'all have lime up here? We've got lime down at home. Such water is not good to drink or for the use in cooking as soft water. That water is best which holds no substances in solution. Well water sometimes contains substances which soak into the well from vaults and cesspools. And at that time, they didn't have as much sanitation as we see today. They had more outdoor plumbing, and you've got more. You didn't have your protection that we see today in the caring for hogs. And that then drains down into the system, which are poured upon the ground, soaked down, out of sight, but are foul substances which they contain are not destroyed. They remain in the soil, which is then when the rain comes, they are washed down into the well if it is nearby. Some people, city folks. We had these city folks from a major city, I'll just say a major city in the United States, moved down to our area, and they bought some property next to a horse farm. And so we have, the state of Tennessee has the health department, but it has an enforcement department also. That enforcement department goes into stores and makes sure that things are labeled and things aren't rotting and things like that, and things are clean. But also their enforcement out in the land of agriculture, in dairies and farms, and that make sure the animals are not being mistreated and what all, and livestock, and that it's healthy then to eat. So they call him the cow police. If your cows get out, they call the cow police to come and get your cows in if you don't do your job, and he then gets on to you if you don't keep your cows in your field. So he tells me this story. He said, these people out of this major city call, and he goes to their house, and they demand that the neighbor's horse farm, which had been there for years, be moved. The fence line be moved. 300 feet. 300 foot is how much? It's a football field. Off that area. And he said, why? They said, we want to put our well over on that corner of our property. And we don't want the products of those horses going down in our well. And he goes, well, put the well somewhere else. You got enough property? He goes, no, we want it right there, so have them move over there. He told them where the interstate was and where they need to head on back up towards. He says, I'll probably lose my job over that one, but I was pretty upset at him. They remain in the soil, and when the rain comes, they are washed down into the well if it is nearby. And that's true. It is best not to drink ice water when the body is heated or during meals. If it is necessary to drink very cold water, the bad effects may be avoided by sipping it very slow. Now, why? What is ice water doing? Well, if it's hot or if it's cold, especially during meal times even, your body has to cool it down to body temperature to digest. It has to warm it up to body temperature to digest, if it's cold or if it's hot. So if it's cold, they have to warm it up. If it's hot, it has to cool it down. And plus drinking with meals isn't good anyway. But even just drinking a bunch of ice water at one time is not healthy for it. It's a shock on the system. Most people drink tea or coffee at their meals, and some persons think that these drinks are useful foods. Now, this is talking about, what's the word for it? Oh, I can't remember the name. There's no name for this type of tea. But anyway, this is your caffeinated teas, like sweet tea. You know what sweet tea is? Sweet tea? Okay. Yes. So sweet tea has caffeine in it. It also has 2 to 3 cups of sugar in it in our neck of the woods. But even if it's not sweet tea, it's usually caffeinated tea. Oh, I know, it's called real tea, R-E-A-L is the name, real tea in herbs. But then you have herbal teas, like what you'd make. What's your favorite herbal tea? Peppermint?
I have too many. Peppermint one, but fever grass.
Okay.
Lemongrass.
Lemongrass, yeah. Lemongrass. What else? What's that? Clover? Oh, yeah. Mrs. White said we should drink clover every day.
I like nettle.
Nettle? That's great for your adrenals. It's great for your hormones. Oh, that's good for your hormones. Plantain? Alfalfa. Yeah, alfalfa is really powerful. It is. It sure is. Also, if you want to increase mother's milk, alfalfa is great to increase breast milk. Here's where I put it, real tea down at the bottom. And some persons think that these drinks are useful foods, but they really have little or no value as foods. Both tea, real, not herbal, and coffee contain a poison, which then separated in a pure form is so deadly that in very small quantities is enough to kill a cat or a dog. This poison often does much harm to those who drink tea or coffee very strong for a great length of time. And it's not uncommon for people to come in and say they drink 2 to 3 pots of coffee a day.
Is it the tannins?
Tannins, yes.
Is it the tannins?
It's also, it could be he's talking about the tannins here. Also the caffeine. Who's had cattle? Who knows what a hot stick is? Okay, so how would you feel if your sister went around poking you with a hot stick throughout the day? It'd be quite irritating to you, wouldn't it? That is what caffeine does to our bodies physiologically. We don't feel it, but it's overstimulating our nerves, and it wears them out. They get fatigued. And so we don't want that caffeine, which is also a problem in caffeinated, whether it's teas or soft drinks or whatever it may be. Alcohol. Now, you'll see Kellogg talks a lot about alcohol because alcohol was a big issue back then. All of you know something about alcohol. Perhaps you have seen it burn in a lamp. I've never seen alcohol burn. Anybody seen alcohol burn in a lamp? I haven't. We've used other things in lamps, kerosene, coal oil, that kind of thing. But I've never used alcohol.
You can burn mineral spirits also
In a lamp? I think of alcohol from a firefighter. It's got a very high, it has a low flash point, and so it's going to catch on fire very fast. I'd say it would, yeah. Perhaps you have seen it burn in a lamp. It will burn without a lamp. It will burn without a lamp. Does that mean a wick? Is that what it's talking about? I don't know what he's talking about there. I didn't understand what he meant there. There's some things Kellogg will talk about that is outside our normal vocabulary today, or what we do. It will burn without a lamp if we light it. Well, obviously, if you light it, it's going to catch on fire. It is also, it is so clear and colorless that it looks like water. That's true where I live. Indians called it firewater. Alcohol differs very much from foods. It is not produced from plants, except where I'm from it is. We can our corn in a jar. Moonshine. As fruits and grains are, neither is its, I guess he says grains. So he is saying from grains, and it's coming from corn. Neither is it supplied by nature readily for our use as are air and water. Fermentation. When a baker makes bread, he puts some yeast in the dough to make it rise, so the bread will be light. Yeast destroys some of the sugar and starch in the flour and changes it into alcohol and a gas. The gas bubbles up through the dough, and this is what makes the bread light. This is called fermentation. A little alcohol, which is formed in the bread, does not harm. Now, we are told to let our bread wait till the next day. You've heard that? Inspiration talks about that. Because it's all driven off by the heat when the bread is baked. Any moist substance or liquid which contains sugar will ferment if yeast is added to it. Well, I've seen folks just take a jar of, a gallon jar of apple cider and pour in yeast, and they've got an alcoholic product a couple of weeks down the road. You know that canned fruit sometimes spoils. This is because it ferments. Fermentation is a sort of decay. That is why we don't mix our fruits and our vegetables, because fruit is digested first and then it can turn into fermentation before the vegetables can that rapidly, according to Dr. Agatha. She says it causes a tornado inside the stomach. Now, if you pull the fibers out, according to Dr. Agatha, it's in the blood within 15 to 20 minutes. Therefore, you don't have fermentation taking place when you mix your fruits and your vegetables, and you can do that in your juices because it doesn't have this process. When the juice of grapes, apples, or other fruit is allowed to stand in a warm place, it works or ferments and thus produces alcohol. And that's a term I wasn't used to, it working or works. Wine is fermented grape juice. Hard cider is fermented apple juice. That's hard cider. Beer, ale, is similar drinks are made from grains. The grain is first moistened and allowed to sprout. In sprouting, the starch of the grain is changed to sugar. The grain is next dried and ground and is then boiled with water. Water dissolves the sugar. The sweet liquid thus obtained is separated from the grain, and the yeast is added to it. This causes it to ferment, which changes the sugar to alcohol. Thus we see that the grain does not contain alcohol in the first place, but that it is produced by fermentation. Again, Kellogg is trying to explain to these children the physiology so that they understand why the alcohol is bad, even though daddy or granddaddy or their buddy drinks alcohol. Did you ever see a Venus flytrap? This curious plant grows in North Carolina. It is called a flytrap because it has on each of its leaves something like a steel trap, by means of which it catches flies. When a fly touches the leaf, the trap shuts at once, and the poor fly is caught and cannot get away. It tries to escape. The more tightly the trap closes upon it, until after a time it crushes to death. The process in which food is dissolved and changed so that it can be absorbed may nourish the body is called digestion. And what happens, the reason Kellogg's using this example is the plant then digests the fly. Now, the digestive tube. The most important part of the work of digestion, our food is done in a long tube within the body. Now, this is interesting, again, physiology-wise. We don't think of it like this today. So this tube he's talking about is from the esophagus to the rectum. We don't think of that. We think of the tube only being the esophagus. But in medicine then, they called this digestion, the whole digestive system being a long tube. And within the body called the digestive tube or canal. This tube is 25 or 30 feet long in a full-grown man, but it is so coiled up and folded away that it occupies but little space. It begins at the mouth and ends at the lower part of the trunk. Well, that's going to be the rectum. The greater part of it is coiled up in the abdomen. which would be your small intestines. The mouth. The space between the upper and the lower jaw is called the mouth. The lips from the front part and the cheeks the sides. The back parts are 3 openings. One, the upper, leads into the nose. There are 2 lower openings. One of these leads into the stomach and the other one goes into the lungs. The back part of the mouth joins the 2 tubes which lead from the mouth to the lungs and the stomach and is called the throat. The mouth contains the tongue and the teeth. Do you know teeth are an organ? They are. If you look it up, each tooth is considered an organ, even in today's anatomy. The first teeth, now I did not know this, and I had no idea, and I have a question for you. Our first teeth, or those first teeth, those which come when we are small children, called temporary or milk teeth, and I've heard that before. We lose these teeth as the jaws get larger, and the second or permanent teeth take their place. There are 20 teeth in the first set and 32 in the second set. Very old persons sometimes have a third set of teeth. Have you ever heard of that? It says very old people.
I don't think they get. The only thing I see is some people as they're older, but not very old, is that they get their wisdom.
Right. But he says here, he says very old persons. Part? Maybe the older teenagers, maybe. Yes.
Well, maybe way back in the olden days when people lived over a couple of 100 years, if they lost another teeth would go. Look at Goliath. He had 6 fingers.
Yeah.
That would have been sort of normal for
Right.
people back in that time because they were huge anyway.
Yeah.
So they didn't consider it unusual for Goliath to have his brothers and his family members to have 6 fingers.
Yeah.
Because he was so huge.
Yeah.
So it could have been a genetic thing.
Maybe.
Working in a dentist office, when you have people that their teeth are extracted for dentures and stuff, sometimes they come back and there's like more root tip, not really, bony tissue, yeah. And so we have to take that out because it can work itself through.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's it.
So let me ask an x-ray question. So you have a child who is, say, 8 years old, 6 years old. You're going to see those upper teeth there, aren't you? So why aren't we seeing them in x-rays if there's a third set?
See, they don't see them at the oral surgeon.
They don't express
You
it
don't
unless it's
expect it.
Yeah.
They just come in and say, hey, I got, this sore spot,
Yeah.
and then you see it.
Wow. That's interesting.
Or it could be very old people have a third set, meaning you got another set of teeth.
Yeah, maybe.
Usually not a whole set.
A set of dentures.
They got a set of dentures.
So this just surprised me when Kellogg talked about this. I didn't know what he was talking about.
Well, if it's not unusual for certain animals, if they lose their teeth, no matter how many sets they get, they keep growing new ones.
Mm-hmm.
You have animals that do that.
Mm-hmm.
They can lose them all and then they'll keep growing them as needed because that part of the development.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not unusual.
I don't know. And it is true. People back years ago would live 118 years.
They would need another set.
I don't know. Okay, the salivary glands. There are 3 pairs of salivary glands. They form a fluid called saliva. It is this fluid which moistens the mouth at all times. When we eat or taste something which we like, the salivary glands make so much saliva that we sometimes say the mouth waters. One pair of salivary glands is at the back part of the lower jaw, in the front of the ears. The other 2 pairs of the glands are placed at the underside of the mouth. The saliva produced in the salivary glands are sent into the mouth through little tubes called ducts. At the back part of the throat begins a narrow tube which passes down to the stomach. This tube is about 9 inches long and is called the gullet. Now, have you ever heard them call it a gullet? I've heard it, but we just don't see, it's the esophagus, what we mostly see it. Or some people call it the food pipe, and I've heard it
Here,
called.
like with in the Caribbean, we call like when you get a chicken,
Uh-huh.
the gullet. That was I think that was
Other
that was a
cultures.
term.
Other cultures more so.
Cultures, yeah.
Okay, but he used that first. That's interesting. And I've heard it called the food pipe or the esophagus. And at the lower end of the esophagus, the digestive tube becomes enlarged and has a shape of somewhat like a pear. This is the stomach. In a full-grown person, the stomach is significantly large to hold about 3 pints. At each end of the stomach is a narrow opening so arranged that it can be opened and tightly closed. And are you seeing more pyloric valve issues? Why? Why are we seeing more pyloric?
Well, I think some of it's overfeeding. We fill our stomachs up.
Yeah, because people eat all day long.
Yeah.
They don't let their bodies completely, don't let their stomach go empty.
Rest. Yeah.
Also, too, the gullet is an English term. The British system, that's how they was taught that
Got it.
gullet.
That makes sense.
That's why in other countries.
Yes, in the Caribbean because yes, like the bonnet on their vehicle. So
Air reflux, yeah, and then there's sometimes the valves, paralysis of the valves for some reason. You see that, so people get.
I'm seeing more and more of that.
But also it ties in with stress too,
And highly acidic foods.
and this type of food, yeah.
And
Yes.
eating before you sleep
Yes. Yeah.
puts pressure on the valve.
But I'm just seeing more and more of that problem. The upper opening allows the food to pass into the stomach. The lower one allows it to pass out into the intestines, which is into the duodenum. This opening is called the pylorus or pyloric valve, which we call. Do you see it more as pyloric than pylorus?
Pyloric,
Right. And then Kellogg's calling it the pylorus. Yeah.
the British way.
Is that probably what it is?
Yeah, still that older English.
Yes. Okay. Or gatekeeper, because it closes so as to keep food in the stomach until it's ready to pass. And that's where I'm seeing the pyloric valve having problems. I'm seeing more and more folks come in with problems with the pyloric valve. In the membrane, which lines the stomach, there are many little pockets like glands in which a fluid called the gastric juices is formed. This fluid is one of the most important of all the fluids formed in the digestive canal. The intestine. At the lower end of the stomach, the digestive canal becomes narrow again. This narrow portion, called the intestine, is about 25 feet long in a grown person. The last few feet in the intestine is larger, which we know that is the small intestine and the large intestine, than the rest, and is called the colon. This long tube is coiled up and snugly packed away in the cavity of the abdomen. In the membrane lining the intestines are to be found little glands, which make a fluid called intestinal juices, or intestinal juice. The liver. Close up, under the ribs, on the right side of the body, is a large chocolate-colored organ called the liver. The liver is about half as large as a head, and is shaped so as to fit snugly into its corner of the abdomen. The chief business of the liver is to make a fluid called bile, and we're seeing more and more issues here, which is very necessary for digestion of our food. I was reading a book on digestion recently, and the doctor was saying, now this is really cool. This is cool. The heirloom versus hybrid seeds. And you've got your heirloom seeds, your food rots faster. Yes? So how do they get them not to rot as fast? They hybridize them, and they hybridize out the chemicals causing them to rot faster. And what that is digestive enzymes. It's actually amylase, protease, and lipase that they hybridize out. And what they're finding is when it's not in the food, the body has to work harder to digest that food now. And it causes undue stress on organs. The bile is a bitter fluid of a golden brown color. It is carried into the intestines by means of a little tube or duct, which enters into the small intestines a few inches below the stomach. When the bile is made faster than it is needed for immediate use, it is stored up in a little pear-shaped sac called the gallbladder. The pancreas is another large and very important gland which is found close to the stomach, lying just behind it in the abdominal cavity. The pancreas forms a fluid called pancreatic juices, which enters into the small intestine at nearly the same place as the bile, the spleen. Close to the pancreas, at the left side of the body, is a dark roundish organ about the size of the fist called the spleen. It is not known that the spleen has much to do with the work of digestion, but it is so closely connected with the digestive organs that we need to know about it, which they just didn't understand it then. 5 major digestive organs. There are 5 important organs of digestion: the mouth, stomach, intestines, and pancreas and liver. Also observed that there are 5 digestive fluids: saliva, gastric juice, bile, pancreatic juice, and intestinal juice. And again, this is very basic for the child. It doesn't get deep. Digestion of a mouthful of bread is the example. Let us suppose that we have eaten a mouthful of bread and can watch it as it goes through all the different processes of digestion. Mastication. First, we chew or masticate the food with the teeth. We use the tongue to move the food from one side of the mouth to the other and to keep the food between the teeth. Now, how long should we chew our food? Until it's baby food consistency. Would you agree? Now, in the mouth, several things are taking place. The first thing we think of is what? Taste. Right? That's one of the things that God gave us in eating is taste. And so when we're eating that piece of, what's your most enjoyable food? Who said bread? Bread? Okay. What's your favorite food?
Mango.
Mango. Ooh, yes. Mango. Pardon? Watermelon. Oh, yes. I like watermelon. When I went to SMC, my second class, that first day of college, was speech. And we sat in a corner, or in a circle, and we said our name and what our favorite food was. And you know what I said my favorite food was? Black-eyed peas. Now, most of them kids had no idea what black-eyed peas were. And the ones that did thought, why aren't you saying watermelon or mango or something else? But I just like black-eyed peas. But I don't eat black-eyed peas like I used to. My grandma used to take black-eyed peas, and you'd put cinnamon on it, and then you put white sugar on it. And, oh, it was so good. But it's not healthy, so I don't eat it that way anymore. So when we look at food, a primary reason, the primary reason is to stay alive and have nutrition. But a big part of digestion, or part of eating food is what? The mouth, the enjoyment, the taste. You eat watermelon because you like the taste of watermelon. You eat mango because you like the taste of mango. And so, have you ever seen people just eat like this? They're not even tasting their food. Not to mention they're not mixing the saliva with it to break it down. But in the mouth, we need to enjoy the food, savor the food. And that's why cultures that sit down and just enjoy that meal, they have a huge blessing. Because our cultures is not, for the most part. We're wolfing it down so we can get back to the job, we can get back to whatever we're doing. And eating is just a task to stay alive. And it should be an enjoyment. You then, in the mouth, you want to masticate it because we don't have teeth in the stomach, and we don't eat like cows where we chew our cud. And so we need to do it right the first time and chew it till it's pulverized or pureed into baby food consistency. But also at that same time, where we're chewing it to a puree, we're mixing the amylase and the protease and the lipase that come in our saliva, like mixing water in a wheel bar, and to where it totally soaks up that water like it's supposed to. Because you don't want dry sackcrete going in a hole. You want plenty of water to make good concrete. And so that mastication is very important, and it needs to be a durable time. First, we chew or masticate the food with the teeth. We use the tongue to move the food from side to side to the other, and to keep the food between the teeth. Mouth digestion. While the bread is being chewed, we're talking about bread as an illustration, the saliva is mixed with it and acts upon it. The saliva moistens and softens the food so that it can be easily swallowed and readily acted upon by the other digestive organs, primarily in the stomach. And so you want that saliva to help to moisten it, but also that your digestive enzymes are plumb soaked in so that when it goes in the stomach, it starts breaking it down. When you chew a piece of bread for a few minutes, it becomes sweet. This is because the saliva changes some of the starch in the food into sugar. You've heard them talk about people who are in POW cramps. They would chew the food and chew it and chew it and chew it and chew it and chew it. Someday we may be in that situation where we don't have adequate food. And we need to know things like that can help keep us alive. Stomach digestion. As soon as the morsel of food enters the stomach, the gastric juices begin to flow out of the little glands in which they are formed. As the stomach expands, then we start producing the digestive enzymes and the hydrochloric acid in that bottom part of the stomach. This mingles with the food and digests another portion which the saliva has not acted upon or did not break down. While this is being done, the stomach keeps working the food like a baker, kneading dough. This is done to mix the gastric juice with the food. After an hour or two, the stomach squeezes the food so hard that a little of it, which has been digested by the gastric juices and the saliva, escapes through the lower opening of the pyloric valve. It's called chyme. That part's called chyme. As digestion in the stomach continues, for more of the digested food continues to escape. Another reason you don't want to drink with meals is it slows this process down because you have to get rid of the liquids first. And then sometimes when you're drinking too much, it actually can cause so much pressure that you can lose some of that chyme through the pyloric valve prematurely before it's totally ready to go out. Another reason not to drink with the meals. Intestinal digestion. We sometimes put peanut butter on our bread or put some other fat in our food. This is not digested by the saliva or the gastric juices. Therefore, the stomach is not breaking that part down. When the food passes out of the stomach into the small intestines, a large quantity of bile is at once poured upon it. The gallbladder sends that to it. And that's why you have a challenge if you don't have a gallbladder. I remember Mary Lou had some pain on her left shoulder. Well, that can be a gallbladder problem, pain left shoulder. So she went to, I was still working in regular healthcare, I think. I was just leaving healthcare. And so I sent her to the doc to get a diagnosis. He said, oh, it's your gallbladder. You've got to take your gallbladder out. I said, let's hold on. Let's get another opinion. And one of my nurses said, I got that problem. And she said, I have fibromyalgia. Why don't you address the fibromyalgia? So we addressed the fibromyalgia by herbs. I then had left. And then we addressed it from some herbs and by addressing the adrenals. By addressing the adrenals, it fixed the fibromyalgia. She didn't have gallbladder problems. And I said, don't have your gallbladder just jerked out. We need it. And she would have been having problems here.
I had one episode where I was taken to, just recently, where I was taken to the emergency room, and just with that one episode, I got a call after I got home from a surgeon, and I was like, no, I'm not going to take it out.
Yeah.
You want to take it out already after just one episode. And I knew what caused it. I had 2 salads back to back with ranch dressing. And then a tablespoon of peanut butter before I went to bed. Oh, I woke up at about 4:30 in the morning and I was in pain.
Oh, yeah.
It was bad.
This bile has been made beforehand by the liver and stored up in the gallbladder. The bile helps to digest the fats in our food, which the saliva and the gastric stomach juices cannot digest. And so the challenge here is where people, the liver isn't producing what it needs to produce, and so they'll look at these bile salts. They'll look at, they're either from bovine, cow, or from pork. And there are some companies out there right now that are testing some products that are non-animal. They're plant-based. And so I'm really hoping that gets matured very rapidly because there's some folks really having some challenges here. The pancreatic juices do the same work that is done by the saliva and gastric juices and the bile. It also finishes up the work done by these fluids. It is one of the most important of all the digestive juices. That's kind of odd there because it's to me it's not, but anyway. The intestinal juices, pardon? At different times, but it's not exactly the same because you've got different pH, you've got different breaking down. So the intestinal juices digest, but it's still breaking it down. The intestinal juices digest nearly all the different elements of the food, so that it is well fitted to complete the wonderful process by which food is made ready to enter the blood and to nourish the body. While the food is being acted upon in the bile, by the bile, it is gradually moved along the intestines. After all those portions of food which can be digested have been softened and dissolved, they are ready to be taken into the blood and distributed throughout the body. Now, what happens here is you have villi, which are like shag carpet and are like little vacuum cleaners. And they have little microscopic holes in them. Now, have you ever been to an apple orchard where they're grading apples? And the little ones go in the hole, then the mediums go in the hole, then the big ones go in the hole? It grades them. Y'all ever seen that done? Or seen anything done in that process? What happens is the intestine, the villi, are like a finger. And as you see there, and it has this microscreen around it. And it has this very small mesh. And if the food is small enough, it goes in. If the food is not small enough, then it goes right on out into waste. And that's where stress comes in. Stress significantly shuts down this process. And we don't adequately break that food down from a micronutrient from a macronutrient to a micronutrient. Here's an example. There was this, I don't think I mentioned it. There was this nurse, and she did lab work. Did I talk about that last night? I don't think I did. And I may have told you this before, but I'll reshare the story. And she takes labs to make some extra money, and she then goes to different places like businesses and churches and different places and draws labs. And like a good nurse, she comes back and she shares with them the findings of the labs and tells them what they need to do to improve the results. And she went to this one group, and the majority of the group had low protein in their blood. And so she asks each individual, what do you eat for breakfast? What do you eat for dinner? What do you eat for supper? And they all presented a good diet, adequate protein. So she's trying to figure out, why is this group of people not breaking the proteins down small enough to get into the blood, for it to be identified in the blood as adequate protein. So she went to a physician friend, who's actually a mutual friend of ours, and he starts investigating. And he found that this was a very conservative group of people. They all went to the same church. They are worrying about what you did and what you did and what you did and what you did and what the preacher did and what everybody else did. You ever met people like that? And what happened is they were stressed all the time. And when you're stressed, we learn that when the adrenaline goes up, the blood pressure goes up, the clotting factor goes up, the communication to the nerves goes up. A lot of things goes up as we go into fight or flight, but digestion is shut off. And so this process of digestion was not taking place as it should be, because the body had shut it down because these people were stressed. You should not eat stressed. If you're stressed, it is better to skip the meal. Because it's not. Have you ever eaten when you're stressed and you get a stomach ache?
Yeah.
Well, you may not even get the stomach ache, but you may not digest that food. And so you're wasting the nutrition. You just defecate it out. Some of that food that's not being broke down properly. And so what was found was it was a conservative church that was just tore up over everything. And they didn't have that calmness, that love. And so if you put a dry sponge into water, it very soon becomes wet and soaking up the water. Indeed, if you only touch a corner of the sponge to the water, the whole sponge will soon become wet. We say that sponge absorbs the water. It is in somewhat similar way that the food is taken up or absorbed by the walls of the intestines. When the food is absorbed, the greater part is taken into the blood vessels. And so these little vacuum cleaners, these villi, which are like shag carpet, if your food's small enough, it's a macronutrient, been broke down properly with digestive enzymes and the pancreatic enzymes, then you do good. If not, it may not be small enough for you. Also, if you can, this is like 1 cell thick. It's a very small piece of material here. And there are things that can break holes into that villi. And then what happens is you get micronutrients in there that haven't been broke down properly enough, and then that makes the body mad and upset because they're not broke down small enough, had enough digestion taking place. And what is that called? Leaky gut, yes. If you want to test if you have leaky gut, there's a lab in Asheville, North Carolina. It's where we used to send our labs to for our patients with who we suspected leaky gut. It's called Genova Laboratories, and it's called intestinal permeability analysis or assessment, I think. And you can either do one out of feces, but it's not as good. the intestinal permeability assessment is much more accurate. And you can get that done. And what it does is you drink a fluid, and then you collect your urine and its macronutrients. And if you have leaky gut, then you have those holes, and the macronutrients can go into your small intestines and then eventually come out the urine. If you don't have leaky gut and you have those only small holes, then it won't get into it and it won't show up in the urine. Liver digestion. After the food has been absorbed, the most of it is carried to the liver, where the process of digestion is completed. The liver also acts like an inspector to examine the digestion of food and remove hurtful substances which may be taken with it. Thoracic duct. A portion of the food, especially the digestive fats, is absorbed by a portion of the lymphatic vessel called lacteals, which empty into the small vessel called the thoracic duct. And that thoracic duct is right there. It comes actually on that left side of the heart is where it enters into the vessel.
Makes sense. One gal told me she said that she had this tube that went from here and across chest into her heart about there. When she had a feeding tube, and I thought, why up there? And now it makes sense.
Now, you can have
Like a,
enteral feeding can be put in up here
okay.
on a port, like TPN, total parental nutrition.
Pass by the heart or something.
It could be like TPN, or it could be hyperalimentation, hyperal. But a lot of times you'll see it put in. So I don't know. And that food is made by pharmacy and many times adjusted daily to make those adjustments. This duct passes upward in front of the spine and empties into a vein near the heart. And it's up into that left side. Eating too fast. A most common fault is eating too fast. When the food is chewed too rapidly and swallowed too quickly, it is not properly divided and softened. Such food cannot be easily acted upon by the various digestive juices because you haven't chewed it down enough and it's still big particles. It's just like when you're making teas. If you have big chunks of roots, it's better to cut them up fine so that you get more plant material out. Eating too much. A person who eats food too rapidly is very likely to injure himself by eating too much. Now, wait a minute. How does rapidly affect eating too much?
Well, you don't know.
That's right. You don't know your food. You're full. Yeah. And then you're right. But if you eat slowly, the body tells you more accurately when you're full. That's true. So that's how it is. The digestive organs are able to do well only a certain amount of work. I had a friend. He was a dentist. And he said digestion is like two men down in the stomach, and they're shoveling coal. And they've emptied the stomach. Boy, we shoveled all that through. We're done. Oh, did you hear that? Oh, no. They're having an afternoon snack, and here comes a whole bunch more food. We got to shovel again. We got to shovel again. Can we wear our digestive system out? We can. And so I asked, you learn by your mistakes. And I used to say, how many meals do you eat a day? And you'd have people say, oh, just 2 meals a day. Or maybe just 1 meal a day. 1 meal a day. When do you eat that meal? Just all day long. They think they're a cow, just grazing all day long. But they count that as just 1 meal because it's just one constant meal all day long. It's not healthy for us. The digestive organs are able to do well only a certain amount of work. When too much food is eaten, none of it is digested as well as it should be. Food which is not well digested will not nourish the body. And why is it not nourishing the body? Because it's still a macronutrient and it's just going right on through and through the feces, and it's not going into the blood. Many children make themselves sick by eating too often. It is very harmful to take, look at this, lunches or to eat at other than the proper meal times. So there's that small little eating between meals called lunches, even in Kellogg's time. The stomach needs time to rest, just as our legs and arms and other parts of the body do. So they're just, they're eating like cows. They're just eating all the time. For the same reason, as well, for us to avoid eating late at night, the stomach needs to sleep with the rest of the body. If one goes to bed with the stomach full of food, the stomach cannot rest, and the work of digestion will go on slowly, so slowly that the sleep will likely to be disturbed. Such sleep is not refreshing. And actually, they tell us that when a person eats before going to bed, that actually food can still be in the stomach the next morning, putrefied and fermented. If we wish to keep our, why do they not feel like eating breakfast in the morning? Well, it's because If we wish to keep our digestive organs in good order, we must take care to eat at regular hours. We ought not to eat when we are very tired. Now, let's go back to when we were kids. We should be as our grandmas. You ladies should be as our grandmas. When I went to my grandma's house and that meal was done, there was no food till the next meal. There was no food even while she was preparing the food. You come in and try to snatch something off and she'd slap your hand or snap your head. No, that'll ruin your meal. And we were not allowed to eat until we sat down as a family and my grandmother took the first bite. Grandmother took the first bite. Did they do that in this area? Now, you grew up in Georgia? Did they do that where you were?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Yes.
I remember sitting next to my grandmother, but I just remember a big table with a lot of people.
Yes. But you ate breakfast at a certain time, dinner at a certain time, supper at a certain time.
And we had to wait.
You had to wait.
We had to wait.
And we should be doing the same thing to our grandchildren because it is not healthy to eat at different times of the day. Kellogg talked about constipation, and he found 5 major causes of constipation. Number 1 was not enough water. Not enough water causes constipation. Number 2 was not enough fiber. Number 3, not enough exercise. He found that exercise stimulated peristalsis. And I will have people who drink plenty of water, who eat plenty of fiber, who exercise, and once they add this 4th item, boom, digestion starts. And that is eating at the breakfast, dinner, supper at the same time every day. Kellogg found that this process here of eating at the same time every day helps with constipation. The 5th item that Kellogg found was he found that you can cause the brain to ignore the urge, and then it doesn't identify the urge. Now, who's ever done potty training with adults, with ladies? Anybody ever done potty training with adult ladies? So what you do is you take the lady who's having some urine incontinency, and the nurse takes them into the bathroom, and they sit on the toilet, they turn on the water. And then the urge, and then the nurse says, "Did you feel that? Did you feel that?" And so you teach the brain to identify what the urge to need to urinate before urination is. And then every 2 hours, you send that patient into the bathroom. And the care plan was potty training. That's what we called it, adult potty training. And every 2 hours, we'd have the lady go into the bathroom, turn on the water to feel that urge, then to identify what that feeling was. So then when she wasn't in the bathroom and she felt that, then she'd know that she needed to go to the bathroom like all of us.
Dementia patients.
Okay. It's called potty training. Well, Kellogg said we can do the same thing with the colon on having constipation. He said we should be as the natives. He said we should, when the urge hits, immediately go. Don't wait till break time. Don't wait till you're finished playing with whatever as a child. Don't wait till you finish doing whatever in the garden. Once you feel it, he said, immediately go. Is how we should do it. And he said the way you retrain the brain to identify the need for defecation is you do that. You feel the need, immediately go. You feel the need, and you can retrain the brain for that feeling of the need of defecation, just like you train those ladies for your Alzheimer's patients.
I know my mom used to get busy and she used to not let herself go to the bathroom, and now she's having troubles.
Yes.
She'll sit there forever. I knew I had to go.
Yeah.
I had to go.
And,
She just sits there.
and Kellogg said both in urination and defecation, both. We should just go when the urge, it's not good on the kidneys to hold it and hold it and hold it. Yeah.
It's good to get a schedule too. It's good to know when, like, I know, some people know, like, okay, yep, it's about 10 o'clock, yep, got a schedule. Got to hit the restroom.
Yes.
They just know.
Yes.
They know when it's coming. And they're on a schedule.
The stomach cannot digest well when we are very much fatigued. And we shouldn't be eating when we're plumb tired. We ought to just go on to bed or skip the meal if we're plumb tired. Sweet foods. We ought not to eat too much sugar or sweet foods. They're likely to sour or ferment in the stomach and so make us sick. Candies often contain a great many ingredients which are not good for us and which may make us sick. The colors used in candies are often poisonous to the body. The flavors used in them are also sometimes very harmful. What are the ingredients?
Is that like red pepper 40
Or yellow, or it could be. I don't know if they had those back then. When I took nutrition from Cornell, they took a Kellogg's strawberry Pop-Tart, and they dissected it, and they did not find any strawberry, but they found over 100 chemicals that made it taste like a strawberry. You know where it says natural flavors? Well, it doesn't really have to be that natural. Yes.
The reason why he was saying the colors, because remember, that was the Industrial Revolution coming down that line. So they were developing all these different things in the food industry that
Yes.
we're using today. So he was saying, even back then when they were starting to develop it, they're not healthy.
And he knew this because his brother was in that industry far too well.
What does natural flavors include? What kind?
It can be all kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff. It can be animals. It can be animals. Animals are natural.
It's just like a lot of people don't know your peanuts. When you look at peanuts, and I was researching this and I did a talk on it, a lot of the dried peanuts, roasted peanuts, have things like gelatin in there.
Wow.
And it's on the label. After we were looking at it, we started reading our label of our peanut box, because now we're like,
Gelatin. Wow.
gelatin,
Yeah. So that could be horse hooves. It could be pig hooves, cow hooves. Yeah.
So, they put these things on there, and when I was learning about that, the gelatin helps the spices adhere to the dry peanuts, when it's roasted, it's in the process.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. We have to be careful, we have to be vigilant of our food choices, because the industry is getting to the point where they're using everything as a scientific chemical to adhere stuff, so you can eat it.
Can you get me some more water? Thank you.
You can pick up two different bags of marshmallows.
Mhm.
And the one you can roast over the fire. The other one, oh my gosh, it just falls apart.
Wow.
It's not made out of the same thing.
Hmm.
You know?
We're almost finished. We'll stop at 5 o'clock, if that's okay with y'all. Fatty foods hurtful. Butter, meats, and other greasy foods are hurtful. Melted fats are especially harmful. Cheese, fried foods, and rich pastry are very poor foods and likely to cause sickness. Now, the word here, he knew at this time because what did Mrs. White say about cheese? Oh, thank you. It is not fit to enter, thank you, ma'am, the stomach. Oh, that feels good. Thank you.
Every nationality had a favorite cheese,
Oh, yeah.
especially the Scottish or the Irish or whatever. They all had a favorite smelly something.
When we got married, right at the time we got married, I told Mary Lou, I said, I want 6 kind of cheeses when I can make enough money. When I graduated and I make me enough money, I said, I want 6 kinds of cheese in the refrigerator, at least 1, if not multiple kinds of crackers when I get home that I can eat before supper. Because, see, I come off a dairy farm. I ate a lot of cottage cheese. I ate a lot of, her meals had so much cheese in it. But we thought that was normal. We thought that was good.
We had milk cows and separated the milk, so we had our own sour cream.
Oh, yeah.
My dad and I, we used to take sour cream and take fresh bread, nice warm fresh bread.
Oh, boy.
I remember that.
Eating too many kinds of foods. Children should avoid eating fresh meats. They should also avoid to avoid eating all highly seasoned dishes and taking too many kinds of food at a meal. A simple diet is much the more healthful. Grain foods as oatmeal, cracked wheat, graham bread, such as delicious fruits and apples and pears and grapes, are the best food for children. Avoid the use of cold foods. We ought not to take very cold food or liquids with our meals. Cold foods, ice water, and other ice drinks make the stomach so cold that it cannot digest the food. You have to warm it up. For this reason, it is very harmful to drink iced water or iced tea or eat ice cream at meals. These things are injurious to us at any time, but they do the greatest amount of harm when taken with food. Sometimes eaten which are not foods. Things which are not foods are often used as foods, such as mustard, pepper, and the various kinds of seasoning. Soda. What is that? Celery?
Saleratus?
Uh-huh.
It's baking powder.
Is that what it is? Okay, thank you. And baking powder also belong to this class. All of these substances are more or less harmful, particularly mustard, pepper, and hot sauces. Common salt. The only apparent exception to the general rule that all condiments and other substances which are not foods are harmful is in the case of salt. This is very commonly used amongst citizens, civilized nations, although there are many barbarous tribes that have never tasted it. It is quite certain that much more salt is used than is needed. At that time, did they have as much fast food, as much soups and canned foods? Not as much back then.